All right, let's dive into one of the most fundamental questions of what it means to be human. How do we get our sense of right and wrong? I mean, think about it. It's a journey every single one of us goes on, from being a kid who just wants to avoid getting in trouble to an adult with a complex set of beliefs. But how does that internal compass actually get built?
So, what's really going on under the hood here? Is it something we just pick up from our parents and teachers? Do we logically reason our way to our own moral code? Or is it more of a gut feeling? This is the big question we're going to unpack today, looking at the theories that started it all and the really important conversations that have shaped how we think about moral development.
Okay, before we go any further, let's make sure we're all working with the same definition. When we talk about moral development, we're talking about this whole package. And notice the key words here. It's not just about thoughts. It's about changes in our thoughts, our feelings, and, maybe most importantly, our actual behaviors when it comes to what's right and wrong. It's the entire blueprint of our moral selves.
To even start to understand this blueprint, you absolutely have to begin with the foundational framework laid out by the psychologist Lawrence Kohlberg. His work back in the mid-20th century basically created this powerful and really long-lasting model for how our moral reasoning grows up. He saw it as a kind of ladder that we climb throughout our lives.
And here it is. This is what that ladder looks like. Kohlberg's whole theory is built on these three big levels of moral reasoning, and each level is then broken down into two specific stages. Now, the central idea here, and this is crucial, is that these stages happen in order. You can't just skip a step. You have to work your way up, building a more complex, more sophisticated moral logic as you go.
So, let's start at the very bottom rung. This is level 1, pre-conventional reasoning. You see this most often in young kids. And at this level, morality is totally external. It has nothing to do with personal principles. It's all about the immediate consequences. So, stage 1 is all about avoiding punishment. I won't hit my brother because I'll get a timeout. Stage 2 is about self-interest and what's in it for me. I'll share my toy with you, but only so you'll share yours with me later. It's a very tit-for-tat view of the world.
Okay, as we climb up to level 2, we hit conventional reasoning. And this is a big shift. Now our moral compass starts to internalize the standards of the people around us, like our parents or society as a whole. Stage 3 is all about being a good boy or a good girl. You want to live up to the expectations of the people you care about. Then stage 4 expands that circle of concern to society at large. Morality becomes about upholding the law, respecting authority, and keeping things in order. Because, hey, that's what makes society work.
And then we get to the top of the ladder. Level 3, post-conventional reasoning. This is where morality becomes truly personal and internalized. It's not about what others say anymore. It's about your own abstract principles and values. In stage 5, you get that laws are basically social contracts we all agree to, but you also recognize that those laws aren't absolute. They can and should be changed if they're unjust. And then, at the very peak, stage 6, well, that's about following universal ethical principles. Things like justice, human dignity, and basic human rights, even if that means breaking an existing law.
Now this is where it gets really fascinating. How does this theoretical ladder actually play out in the real world? Well, this 20-year study gives us a fantastic look. Just follow the lines. You can see stage 2 reasoning that what's in it for me thinking drops off as people get older. Meanwhile, stage 4, the law and order stage, becomes the dominant way of thinking for most adults. But look at the top. Stage 5 reasoning only shows up in a small sliver of the adult population. And stage 6? It was so incredibly rare that they eventually had to remove it from the scoring system. So, reaching those highest levels isn't a given at all, it's actually exceptional. And maybe that's because it requires you to question the very social norms that give us comfort and stability. And that's a tough thing for anyone to do.
Okay, so Kohlberg gave us this incredibly powerful map for moral thought. But as influential as his theory was, it didn't take long for some serious challenges to pop up. And the first one is maybe the most obvious. What about the gap between what we think and what we actually do? Does thinking like a moral philosopher automatically mean you'll act like one?
This quote just cuts right to the chase, doesn't it? We can all probably think of someone who can talk a big game about ethics, but whose actions, well, they don't exactly line up. And this was a major critique of Kohlberg's framework. He based his stages on how people reasoned about hypothetical problems, but that puts way too much emphasis on just thought. The critical takeaway here is that knowing what's right and actually doing what's right are two completely different things.
All right, so the next big challenge to Kohlberg's ladder was a question about its universality. I mean, does this one-size-fits-all model really work for everybody in every culture across the globe? And a huge question, Does it fully account for potential differences in how men and women tend to approach moral questions?
And this question brings us to the groundbreaking work of Carol Gilligan, who was one of Kohlberg's most important critics. She argued that his theory had a pretty significant gender bias. She said Kohlberg's framework, which really celebrates abstract principles and individual rights, reflects what she called a justice perspective. In contrast, she proposed a care perspective. This view doesn't see people as isolated individuals making decisions alone, but as part of a whole web of relationships. So from a care perspective, the highest moral good isn't some abstract principle. It's compassion, nurturing, and making sure you maintain those vital connections to other people.
And there's another wrinkle here. We have to distinguish between actual moral rules and what are called social conventions. See, moral rules are about big things, like justice and welfare. Don't steal, don't hurt people. But social conventional rules are more about etiquette, about keeping things running smoothly, like raising your hand in class or knowing which fork to use at a fancy dinner. Critics pointed out that Kohlberg's theory kind of lumps all rule following together, without really separating these two very different domains.
So, if morality isn't just a simple ladder of pure reason, what are we missing? Well, to get a truly complete picture, we have to move beyond just thinking and bring in the incredibly powerful roles that our emotions and even our personality play in our moral lives. So let's explore what that more complete picture actually looks like.
A huge piece of the puzzle is empathy, that ability to feel what someone else is feeling. And as this timeline shows, empathy isn't just an on-off switch. It develops over time. It starts in infancy as this sort of global response. You know how when one baby starts crying, all the other babies in the nursery start crying too? That's it. But over time, a genuine concern for others begins to appear. Then in early childhood, we get that others have their own unique perspectives. And by 10 or 12, we can feel empathy for entire groups of people in situations we've never been in. This emotional engine is a critical driver of moral behavior.
Beyond just feelings, we also have to talk about personality. For some people, morality isn't just a list of beliefs they hold, it's a core part of who they are. We call this moral identity. It's when your moral commitments aren't just something on the side, they are central to your sense of self. If you have a strong moral identity, you see yourself first and foremost as a moral person.
And that leads us right to moral character, because this is the bridge that finally closes that thought-behavior gap we talked about earlier. Moral character is about having the willpower, the grit, to actually act on your moral identity. It's what separates people who mean well from the people who actually stand up and do something when it matters. It means having the strength of your convictions, being able to keep going when things get tough, and pushing through obstacles to do what you truly believe is right.
And when you see moral identity and moral character all come together at the absolute highest level, that's when you get what researchers call moral exemplars. These are people who have lived lives of extraordinary moral commitment. We're talking about people like Martin Luther King Jr., Mother Teresa, or Nelson Mandela. They don't just have sophisticated moral reasoning. Their entire lives are a testament to the fusion of moral thought, feeling, identity, and most importantly, action.
So the big takeaway here should be a much richer and honestly a much more useful view of morality. Yeah, we started with Kohlberg's elegant ladder of reason, but we've seen that to really get our arms around our moral selves, we have to look at the whole person. This bigger, more integrated view is so much more powerful because it helps explain everything, from the small acts of kindness we see every day to the incredible courage of those moral exemplars. It's a dynamic dance between our thoughts and our actions, fueled by our feelings and anchored in the very core of who we are.
And that leaves us with one final question for you to think about. When you're facing a really tough decision, what do you fall back on? What's the foundation of your moral compass? Is it the established rules and laws of society? Is it that feeling of empathy, that deep desire to care for others? Or is it a personal principle that you hold, no matter what? There's no single right answer here, of course, but just understanding your own starting point is the first step to understanding the moral person you are and the one you want to become.